there. It's nice to see there's some hockey fans in the audience. Just noticed a couple come in. I'm here today to tell you a little bit of a story. The story I'm going to share with you is about a group of men that were some of the best in the world in their particular area. And the story starts with them sitting in a dugout, staring into space. Now this picture, I've been lucky to talk to these players about this particular picture, what they were thinking and what they were feeling. And one of the things that came through was they had the common feeling that they were sitting there, although being in a group, they felt very alone. They also wondered, how do we make this next step? They'd been climbing the world ladder, or the rankings in the world, for several years, and they kind of felt that they were stuck. Now, alongside this picture was also the time when I entered the story of the Belgium Red Lions. And my role was to come in, and I was going to be the fifth coach in 4 years to be working with this particular group. Now, I knew it was a very talented group, and I knew that in most of the clubs that they worked in, they were the stars of their teams. They were the leaders. But in the Belgium Red Lions, there were so many of them. And one of the things that was coming through was, rather than them being a team full of stars, we wanted to change that. And to change that, we wanted to make a star team out of them. And today I'm going to share with you a little bit of that process that we took them through. And the process, although it's a sports team, it's dealing with people. And a big part of dealing with people is bringing them together. And so I was really lucky to work with a very talented assistant coach. And he had been a player in the Belgium Red Lions, and he had moved from a player into a coaching position. And his name is Phil Goldberg. And he is very, very talented, and he would challenge me often. But we spent a day together, and we started to try and design a strategy to take this team from being good and seeing if we could turn them into something great. And we came up with 5 topics and 5 strategies. And I'm going to try and describe how we use these strategies to create a team. The first one is we wanted to create what we call a circle of trust. Normally in an Olympic year, what would happen is you would take a team out of Belgium in around December, January, because it's too cold, the field freezes over and you can't train. And so we would take them to South Africa. And South Africa is a great place to go because you can fly overnight and you play the next day. You don't lose any sort of training time. The food is very good, and it's actually relatively cheap to base yourself there. Now, normally in an Olympic year, you would train them really hard for 10 or 11 days, and then you would set up 3 or 4 games against South Africa. And now, no offense to South Africa, but normally Belgium is better. So after the 3 games, you feel pretty good about what you've done, and you get on a plane, and the whole thing's a success. Now, this time, we wanted to do something a bit different. We still wanted to play the games at the end, but we removed half of the training sessions and put them inside. And we changed the emphasis of what we were doing. So this time, we thought, okay, let's see what we have with this group. And so what I did was every time they came into the dining room, so for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I would I would plot where they sat. And they had a group of tables that were spread around the room. And what would happen is you'd have a group of players that belonged to Leo. They would go sit in one group. A group of What Ducks. There would be one player from Brax. He would sit by himself. No, he didn't. He joined one of the other groups. But you could see very quickly that they've sat where they felt most comfortable sitting. The other thing that was pretty disturbing was in the middle of the dining room, the tables were spread like that, but there was kind of this imaginary line similar to this. Now, on one side of the line were the French-speaking players, and on the other side was the Flemish-speaking. At this point in time, I thought, whoa, we really have a problem here, and we've got to do something about this. And so what we set up, a series of what we called speed dating. And it's not the speed dating of swiping left and swiping right of the modern generation. It's the old school one where you sat knee to knee, eye to eye, and you stared and spoke to the person sitting in front of you. And it was very, very simple. We said that they were to say two things that they liked about the person sitting in front of them, and one thing that they thought was interesting or that they thought they could work on to be even more productive in the group. Now, the concept of speed dating is pretty simple. If you like someone in the speed dating environment, now you have an opportunity to revisit that conversation that you had earlier. It's actually not the 2 minutes where you're saying nice things. We did this and a few other exercises like this. And then what we watched is, rather than the players coming in and sitting in their clusters that they felt comfortable with, now what we saw is when they walked into the room, whoever they walked in with, they would sit beside and they would start talking about things. And maybe it was about the thing they talked about at the speed dating or something else. That didn't matter. What we also noticed was now the room was getting louder and louder and louder because the tables were talking across table conversations and the room was changing. The dynamics you could see were different. And it was at that point in time where my assistant coach, Phil, looked at me and said, wow, that's the first time I've actually seen the Belgium Red Lions team. But we still had to address this divide. Well, nearly pulled my pants down then. We had to fix this divide. And so one of the things that I have that's actually an advantage, because I'm very bad at French and very bad at Flemish, I either offend everyone or everyone gets offended the same amount, and I sit in this little pocket of space. And it's a great pocket. It's a place where I can observe. And what I observed about Belgium is it's a fantastic country. Belgian people have this gift. They have the ability to talk to people who are standing in front of them in the language that they most feel comfortable talking. And it's fantastic. Not everywhere in the world it's like that. It's a very special place. In the past, a French-speaking coach would have a great relationship with the French players, but the Flemish players would feel a bit left out, and vice versa. And so because of where I sat, offending everyone or no one, I thought we need to address this in a different way. And so what I said to them is, when we play against France, we will do all our tactics in Flemish. And then we can speak openly on the field, and they don't know what's going on. When we play against Holland, we do everything in French. They don't know what's going on. And when you play Korea, well, no one knows what's going on when you play those guys. So that didn't matter. But it's the first time that it had been said to the players as being a strength, and not something that divided, but something that actually brought us closer together. And when we looked at it like that, a lot of the thinking that we had been doing in the past, rather than being divisive, we could put together. And there is a difference. The way that the two groups were thinking about things changed. The next thing that I wanted to address with my staff was, I'm a big fan of better people make better Red Lions. And the example I'm going to give to you, I'll tell you why it happened. So in sports teams, you're probably a little bit like in a business. You often will have performance indicators that you want to be hitting and things like that. Same in the sports field. So we call them individual performance plans. And what I'm good at is probably when I come into an organization, I can do 3 or 4 things, new projects that add to the environment of the project. If I start doing 5 or 6 or 7, I know myself. I cannot do it. And so what I do is I make a list of things that I would like to be done really well in the organization. And they can be simple, they could be just fun things, but just looking at how it can be a better place to work. So I create this list. And then what I do is I set up interviews with my athletes. And the interviews are based around a homework task. And one of the ones that I do very early, and it's a really successful one, is I say to them, okay, next week we're going to go to the Olympic Games. The only criteria that we have is I want you to pick a team, the 11 starting players, and you have to be in that team. And you have to be able to justify why you were there. Now, the players like it for a couple of reasons. One is they feel as if they're going. The second, it opens them up so that they can talk quite freely about things. And I have a series of questions I ask with them. The first question I ask is, okay, so why have you put yourself in that position in the team, and what do you bring to the team? And it's a really nice opening for them. They can talk very openly about their strengths and what they do well and things like that. It's fantastic. The next question I ask them is, okay, so if you've put yourself in that position, who are the players that you've put directly around you, and why have you put them there? Now, this gives great information as well, because they start talking openly about the people that they've put around them, why they've put them there, the strengths of others. And it's a really nice opening that they can talk freely about those players. I also ask them, okay, list your top 3 favorite players to play with. And they do that. Now, once you've done that homework exercise with the whole group, you actually find there's 3 or 4 players that appear on everyone's list. What is great about that for a coach is you don't have to ever talk about selection with them. Those players are in. And the reason they're in is because they're the glue that hold everything together. The next thing I ask them is, okay, if you were to give yourself a ranking out of 10, what would you give yourself for where you're at the moment? And there always seems to be a magic number, and that number is 7, which I actually think sometimes they think they're an 8 or maybe a 9, but they don't want to appear dicky neck, and so new coach in, I'll say I'm a 7. It's a very good number to work with. And the reason it's good, and the reason that question is important, the next thing I ask them is, okay, for you to move to a 7, from a 7 to an 8 or a 9, what do you need from us? What do you need from your coaching support group that's going to help you make that shift? And then you get a very clear idea of how does this person operate? What do they need? How are we going to be most helpful, and how can we provide the best environment for them to develop? Now, the very last thing that I do, and I probably shouldn't do it the way I do it, but I also want to have a bit of fun, I ask them a very difficult question. And the question I ask them is, okay, so what do you bring to this group in this environment? Now, because they're talking hockey and we've been talking hockey, they'll often say, yeah, look, I run fast or I train hard. I stop them and I say, look, I've asked you the wrong way. What I mean is, if we didn't select you, or if you didn't make it this team or this squad, what would we miss? Why is this a better place for you to be working in? And why are we better off with you here? It's quite a tough question. So I follow it and I say, okay, if you can't think of anything at the moment, take a couple of days, but I've got this list of things that I want to get done, and if you can't think of something that you want to do, I'll give you something from here. You can choose it. And so I don't think anyone wanted any of the jobs on my list, so everyone within a couple of days would call me. Now, every organization have different types of people. Now, there's this one person that was in our group, and a fantastic guy, a very, very good hockey player, but he was wired and thought differently than the other players. And so I took him through this process, and he couldn't think of anything. Until 11 o'clock at night, I get this phone call, and it's this player, and he says, look, I've had this idea, but I need a small budget. And I'm thinking, okay, you haven't started well, it's pretty late, and you're after money, it better be good. And so what he said was, I have this friend, and this friend, he owns a fruit and vegetable store, and he's really keen to do something for the Belgian Red Lions. And so what I thought I could do is, if I have a small budget, I could buy 2 big blenders, and then I'll make an order. The day before we have a double training session, he can drop off a whole lot of fruit and vegetables, and then when we finish our first session in the morning, I'll go out the back, make these smoothies and so on, the players can have a shower, and when they come back from their shower, the smoothies will be on the table, ready to go. I thought, wow, that's a really cool idea. I like it for a number of things. One is it's nutritional, it's high performance, but it's also very caring and selfless to be able to do that. And so I said, look, let's do it. And so we bought these blenders and we watched it unfold over the next month. And what we saw was that the players brought him closer into the group, and they did it in a couple of ways. So each time there was a double session, they congratulated him on his almond and avocado smoothie and thanked him for doing that. And so he was inundated with these compliments and this recognition of some things that he had done that was selfless. If that was all it was certainly enough. But the thing that also happened was, in making the smoothies, he would go out the back and he would work with the catering staff. And they were preparing food for the Belgian Red Lions. And he got a first-hand understanding of how incredibly proud those people were to be preparing that food and being part of the Olympic journey. And with 1 month to go before we went to the Olympics, I kind of have this deal with the marketing department, no signing or no memorabilia or things like that. And with 1 month to go, I walked in to the dining room where we were eating, and there was a table like this, and the guys were gathered around the table with some shirts, and they were signing something. Now, I stormed over, and if you know me a little bit, it's very difficult to tell if I'm storming. I know I'm storming. I just walk slightly quicker than normal, but I stormed over there and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they said, "Yeah, we're signing shirts." And I said, "Yeah, I can see that, but surely the marketing department knows now's not the time. What are you doing?" And they said, "Oh, no, look, we're actually signing shirts for the chef and the sous chef because they've done such a fantastic job of preparing food for us over this course of time." So I took a step back, thought, whoa, I got that wrong, and I observed. And what I observed was this, the person that was signing the shirts presented the shirts in the language that was most comfortable to the sous chef and the chef, and it was a really quite emotional moment. And in that particular moment, what happened was our circle of trust got bigger. It didn't just capture the players, it also captured that group. It captured the group of the catering staff as well. The other thing that we noticed was that we had seen a group change from a group of athletes that used to eat, leave all their cutlery and plates on the table, and then go play cards or go have a sleep. Now what we watched was a group of athletes that picked up all of their cutlery, their plates, took it out the back, and put it in the sink or the easiest area for the catering staff to work. And all of that was achieved by a simple task of getting some blenders and making a little conscious effort to be selfless for a team. Now the next thing that we had to work on was, it was represented quite well in this photo, and it's one of my favorite photos, and I'll tell you why for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the team in white is the Belgium team, and this was taken within 10 seconds of winning the semi-final at the Rio Olympics. And what it, to me, is it's a great representation of the circle of trust needing to be together. And it's like a magnet when you experience something like this. And you might think, well, all teams celebrate like that. Really interesting to watch a team celebrate, and you learn a lot from it. Often, it's groups of players celebrating. So you have 2 or 3 friends that have worked really hard for that particular goal, or you have a few players running to the coaching staff, a few players running to the crowd, to their partners and things like that. But when you have a true team, there's kind of like this center point that they all run to, and it's really well represented here. The second thing I love about the photo is the Dutch players. The reason I like it is because they never look like this. And the reason they never looked like this before is it's the first time ever in the history of hockey that Belgium beat Holland. about 12 years ago, what used to happen is our players used to go play Holland and they would be asking them for autographs. So this was quite a memorable moment. But what's uncanny about this was the morning before they were about to play Holland in the semi-final, that was the team they wanted to play. Now, what we put that down to is that in the months leading into this particular tournament, I'll explain it a different way. Hockey's not like football in that you can rent out a whole hotel and things like that. We often have to share hotels with tournaments with other teams. And so what you would have is a meeting room like this, and players from one team would have their meeting, then they would exit, then we would come in. Now, if you're lucky enough to come in and you follow a Holland or Germany or something like that, sometimes you find a playbook because they leave their playbooks behind. And so I've found a Dutch one, I found a German one, I found a Welsh one. You don't have to worry about Wales, guys. They're not up to much. But those other nations, they're pretty tricky. And so I never wanted to lose IP information in that situation. So what we did is we had a room, not as big as this, but we called it our Olympic room. And on this, we would put their individual performance plans, we would put all of our tactics and so on, so that we kind of view our room as a three-dimensional playbook. But one thing that we were very purposeful with was we chose some photos. And the photos that we chose were against teams like Australia, Germany, and Holland that we hadn't beaten before, with our players blown up into full-size pitches, and they were dominating against these teams. So we'd be scoring a goal against Holland. A player would have two hands in the air, or a player running as fast with the ball as he could, and two Australians really struggling to keep up. So every day for 10 months, these players were inundated with the concept that we were dominant, that we were better than all these other players. And so on that day was a really special day, and that was the day that Belgium beat Holland for the first time. The next thing, or the last thing in our construction of a team, was a directional thing. And when you're in a leader position or a leadership position, one of the things you often do will write notes or make lists. And so I made two lists. Now, one list was the obvious one, okay? What do we need to do better? And so on this list, we would write quite a few things, and they were just, is our penalty corner world class, and things like that. The second list was a directional one, and it was actually the most interesting. And once we started it, we could see that we were going to go in a positive direction. This list was, what are we doing well, but can still do better? So how do we turn a strength into a superpower? And when you start talking to athletes about strengths and superpowers, what kind of happens is they feel as if they put on a cape and they kind of chest out and they're kind of like superheroes. And they started training like that as well. And so we saw very quickly that there was an improvement in output. So players that were fast became faster. Players that were skillful spent more time working on that skill and became exceptional in those particular areas. And because players were good at it, they wanted to do it. And so they invested more and more time. And in the end, they became successful. Now, once you build a culture or manipulate a culture or however you want to do it, or call it, it's not that it's tick a box and it's done. You have to constantly keep control of it. And one of the things that I do is I monitor all the players' Instagram accounts and things like that. And what I'm looking for is very, very simple. What are they promoting? Now, when our culture is spot on, you see them promoting others' success and other people doing well, or the team is promoted. When we've been away from them for a while, or we haven't done a culture piece for a while, what we see is a lot of self-promotion. So this is my new watch, or I'm driving this new car, or things like that. And so whenever that starts to happen, we know, look, we have to readdress some things and bring them all back together. But things do change. And one of the things that I've discovered with being the person that keeps the image, is that I need images. And the reason I need them is they help me tell a story, but they also help to keep us connected. And so I'll just take you through a really simple exercise we did with the team. And this can be used in any organization. And it's very, very simple. I came in and I wanted to know, where do people think we're at? And so I gave them this and said, okay, write one letter on your hand. In my naivety, I thought all of the players would be at the letter at the bottom of the mountain with about 10 months to go. What I was surprised about was that every letter, except for the top two, were covered by the athletes. And each of them could describe very, very well why they thought they were there. So, for example, there was one that put us at A. And the reason they put us at A was that they're on the road to where they want to go, but they don't know how fast we're going. They've never had much contact with me. They don't know how I'm going to steer them down the road and things like that. All of them were pretty obvious, except for my mate, the milkshake maker. He said C. And I thought, C. And then he explained it. And what he said was that most other countries, rather than having 10 months to build for this event, they have had 4 years. And so it should be obvious that we have to actually go a different way. We can't follow the main path. We have to do things differently. And to be fair, he was right. We had to do things differently. And so what we did with about 2 weeks to go is we did the same exercise. And as a coach or a leader of the group, what was incredibly comforting is that we were all within 2 letters. We were towards the top of the mountain and looking for our last final push. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of how I worked with a group, just so that, it's not hockey stuff. I didn't bring hockey balls and things like that, but this was a classroom situation. And I spoke to you about the assistant coach that I thought was a really good guy and so on. And when you're working with someone that you admire and think is talented, you often take them stuff, and I took him this piece of work called the Avalanches. And he said, yeah, well, it's good. And I said, what do you mean it's good? This is really good. And he said, oh, yeah, I can understand why you're so excited about it, because you've been hired for this actual job. This is the job, or this is the game that they never get over. But for the players, because they've never got over this, it's a real opportunity to make them feel that pain so that they can bring back better stuff. And so I said, oh, okay, I'll try it. And he had quite a good concept. And so what I did is I asked the players to come into the room, grab a piece of paper and a pen, and we're going to talk about India. And we'd done a guess that, look, India could be a team that we meet in the quarterfinal at the Olympics. And so as they came in, there was a bit of rustling, there was a bit of mucking around on the paper. And I walked and I talked. And I said, oh, India, they have these as threats. They're a good nation. This is the playing style, in which they did. And as I walked around, I noticed they were doing flowers and butterflies and things like this. There was no hockey being written on the paper at all. And so I kept in character, and I started to flick through the following slides. And with each slide that I flicked through, the writing stopped, the attention turned towards me, and there was a silence in the group that was really eerie. And at this point in time, I thought, wow, maybe my assistant coach, maybe he's not that amazing after all, and maybe he wants to be the 6th coach in 5 years. But I thought, look, I'm going to carry on here because I'm too deep. And so what I said was, look, I'm sorry, guys. We did our very best, but we failed. And there are a few housekeeping things that we've got to get done. So the first thing is the chef de mission has been in contact. We have to exit the village, and they have the swimming group that's going to be coming in, and so we need to be out. I've spoken to the airlines. We can't get everyone out at the same time, so those that have children and a family, we're going to get you out on Saturday, but the others, you're going to have to stay on an extra week just because of logistics and so on. The third thing is, I've been in contact with your support network, and there's a couple of messages they want you to know very quickly. One is they love you immensely, and they can't wait to hold you and to be with you again and try and make things all right. And the last thing is there's a reporter, and he's after a story, and what he wants to know is whose fault is it, what went wrong, and who's to blame. So be very, very careful over the next few days that you are guarded with your answers and so forth. Super quiet, really quiet. It's like here. And then we gave them this task. Now, the red lines, they're clever guys. And if I ask them to do a piece of work, usually you got about 45 minutes where they're good. So I gave them some flip charts and some pens and gave them this really simple task. And it's just play the game in your mind. What went wrong? That's the task. And usually after 45 minutes, they're done. So 45 minutes flew by. I walked around the groups. The chatter was going fantastic. An hour and a half, they're still going. I have 3 little kids, and I had to get home and go pick the kids up from school. So after 2 hours and 15 minutes, I said, hey guys, we're going to have to stop there. Gathered all the information that they put in, but it was the best piece of work that I've seen from any sporting team before. It was incredibly honest, and what they were able to do was they were able to talk about things that could happen. And so we called them the avalanches. And they came up with 6 things. The first one, I need my glasses here. The first one was domino effect after setback. So in the sports field, you can have games where a goal is scored early or you lose a game, and how you stay focused and regroup after that. It's success after failure. They also had the idea of a star team versus a team of stars. And how they described it really well was, if you scored an Olympic goal, that's the kind of thing that you would tell your grandkids about. It's something to be incredibly proud. But if you had a 50-50 chance to score, or if you passed to your teammate, they had an 80-20 chance, would you make that pass? And it was a discussion that didn't take long, but it was an important point to bring up. They also talked about lack of leadership. And I knew this was, I read a newspaper article that said the Belgian Red Lions lacked leadership on the field. It was never a more untrue statement said. What was the problem was they weren't sure how to lead. You had all of these leaders with capabilities that just weren't sure how to lead. They talked about time management. They talked about confusing roles. And in the end, when they put this together, we presented it back to them. And I'm not going to take you through all of the things that they presented, but I'll give you an example. One of our players, an assistant or vice captain, Felix Denier, very, very impressive person. And one of his qualities, he lacks emotion. So it's no good for his wife because he forgets birthdays and things like that. For us, it's pretty good because he can be like a coaching staff member on the field that doesn't get caught up in the heat of the moment. So if there's a break in play and teams come into a huddle, Felix's job is to do 2 or 3 things so that the players that come in, they know what to do, and then they go back out and they do those things. Up until that point in time, what had happened is everyone would come in, everyone's got a great idea, all of them great, all of them different. They run away from each other, and then everyone does their great idea differently, and there is no team plan. So a simple meeting like this gave us some structure in which we could do things. The other one that is really was really interesting was the domino reaction after setback. And what happened here was it was kind of like holding up a mirror to some of our players. And I think in every team or every organization you have different types of groups, and we call them different things. So one group we had was called bench trash talk. So those are the ones that complain about everything. So it's too hot, it's too cold, the turf is too wet. I played for 4 minutes 30 and I should have played for 5 minutes. All the type of thing. The umpiring's bad. So what happens with these players is when they come off the field, they walk off and they sit and they come to the bench and they're mumbling and they're complaining about things. And you see the players that are sitting beside them kind of trying not to get in their eye contact and hoping that they're not going to get yelled at. And they're trying to concentrate on the game, and this person's going ballistic at stuff. For the person themselves, it doesn't bother them. It's just part of how they go on with things. But it has an impact on others. So what we did is the player that was struggling with their bench trash talk, we made them a process. And so what they did is when they came off, we gave them a drink bottle, they grabbed a hesher or a bib, they'd put that on, they would walk down there, they'd mutter away, they'd kick the ground, they'd do this, whatever, didn't matter. But by the time they got back into the group, they were calm. And so the guys that were on the bench were able to focus and be ready for when they go on next. Now the one that, not everything is measurable, but we saw things change. The one that was really impressive was the card risk players. So that is, there were signs of us being successful leading into the Olympic Games. Every time we had 11 players on the field, we beat every team that we played. The problem was every time we got a card, a yellow card, or someone sent off, we lost, or we had goals scored against us. So we had this discussion, and we put some rules in around those players that were card risk players. Now, at the Tokyo Olympics, as well as the Rio Olympics, one of the things that happened was that our team had the most number of players on the field for the most amount of time. So already we're probably the best team on the field, but when you have the best numbers plus the best team, your chances of winning those games, they just become so much greater. And that came from nothing, from no training, but just a small little meeting that we had. And so what that led to, in the first instance, was a silver medal. And it was a kind of a tournament of firsts. So it was the first time we beat Holland. It was the first time we stood on the podium at a world event. But it was also the first time we lost gold. So this was the look that I have up at the athletes while they're standing on the podium at one of their greatest moments. And it was actually at this moment that I decided, look, I'm not going to do this for 10 months. I want to do this longer. Not because I felt sorry for the players or a sadness or anything. I saw that there was an incredible opportunity. And the saying, you need to lose a final to win a final, I had never fully understood the meaning of it until that day. And there were so many things that we learnt. In Rio, one of the things about the village was that there was no internet until you actually got into your apartment. And so what would happen is after we played our semi-final game, walked into our apartment and my phone started going ding, 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 ding. It went for about 45 seconds. It was kind of like I won a jackpot at a casino. It was one of those type of moments. And they were full of messages of congratulations and so on. The next 2 to 3 days, I walked around every apartment and talked to the players. And every time I walked in a room, they were on their phone or on a tablet or something. They were interacting and trying to answer back messages. And it became overpowering. And so what they decided to do in the next event was to put limitations on their screen time, as you do with your children and stuff. And so their screen time was allocated to the closest people that they were connected to. And they were only doing that 1 hour a day. So it gave us, our next time to kind of test ourselves came 2 years later. And so we were still the silver generation until that point in time. And the World Cup was in India. And India is a crazy place and a wonderful place to play hockey. And the reason it's so wonderful is it's the hockey stadium. It's like a temple. and we would stay in a pretty nice hotel, but this old bus would come and it would pick us up, an old school bus. So you've got to imagine the oldest school bus that you can possibly imagine. When you have that, and hopefully you've got that, now add another 15 years to that bus. And that's what picked us up. And we would chug along, hoping we were going to get to the ground. And as we would drive towards this like temple, we would jump out of the bus, and I would be the first out. One, because I was happy to be there. But second, that just seems to be the role that a coach does. And as you jumped out, I would walk through this tunnel. And this tunnel would have on the side of it the history of the World Cup and all of the players that had played and all the fantastic moments and so on. And I loved the history. And as I would walk down there, the last thing you see is this plaque, and there's this question mark on the plaque. And so I looked at the question mark, looked at the ground, looked at it again, and then walked on a little bit. And then I turned and watched my team follow the same path. And as they walked down in twos and threes, they were laughing and just what teams do. But then they all got to the sign. And then when they looked at the sign, they would look at the ground and they would fall silent and they would walk past me. And every single one of them did that. And I thought, wow, this is such a crazy phenomena or a crazy experience. And I thought, I must be able to use this somehow. And so I thought I would use it in the final briefing before we played the final against Holland of the World Cup in 2018. And I told them 3 stories. The first story was a really simple one. As I said, I have 3 young children. Emma, the middle one, was going to creche when we were in India. And so each day my wife would take Emma to the creche, and I would ring in the evening and find out how it went. And my wife would say, yeah, Emma cried today. And I would think, I'm glad I'm in India, otherwise I'd have to take Emma to the creche, and I don't like it when she cries. But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday was the same every night, every time we spoke. On Friday, I rang my wife and I said, how was Emma today? And she said, yeah, Emma was fine. She just ran into the creche, but I cried. And then I knew I was in the right place, because my wife crying is worse than Emma crying. So I shared that with the team, and I kind of said, it's a little bit like us. At the start, when we took over the team, you needed us much more than you need us now. Now is your time. You've got this, and this is your area and your way to show us what you know. And when you go on the field, you can play with immense confidence that you are ready to play this game. The second story I told them was about our second keeper. Now, when we played the semi-final against Holland, it was a close affair. When we played the next semi-final, we played England. And with 15 minutes to go, we were leading 6-0. Now, you remember my walk when I'm a bit frustrated, it's quite quick. When you're leading 6-0 internationally, you kind of have this other walk. It's more of a, we're up 6-0, nothing's going to go wrong type of walk. And so I do that walk up to the second keeper. And I say to him, and he's a young guy that's always wanting to play. I said to him, are you ready? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, if you want to play, now's your moment to play. He hadn't played a minute of the World Cup until that time. He looked me back in the eyes and he said, you know I would love to play, but why would we change things? Things are going so well. Why would we even look to tamper it? And so I explained that to the team. And at that singular moment, the team could recognize that they had a player that they were going to be carrying onto the field in spirit that put everything that he wanted to do into the team. And you'll never get a better illustration of selfless behavior. And the last story I told them was the story of Slumdog Millionaire. And it's a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen the movie, you should. The premise of the story is this young kid growing up in India gets on this game show, and he's about to win a million US dollars or the equivalent on. And because of how he's lived his life, he knows all of the answers to these questions, except he doesn't know the answer to the last one. but because of everything that's led him to that point, he knows whatever answer he says is going to be the right one. And I said, it's like us. We don't know how we're going to play this game, but one of the things for sure, if the stars are aligned and it's meant to be, we're going to walk away and we're going to be the world champions. And because I would like to think, in part, the pressure of that performance was removed a little bit, we allowed the athletes to go forth and do what they do best. And this is one of my favorite photos, and it's one of my favorites because I'm actually in it. If you have a look very carefully at the red thing here, the little guy at the back, that's me. But why I like it, it's a really good representation of how our team works. Like, I get a lot of reflected glory about the brilliance of these players, and I quite like that position of watching them. I always have the best seat in the house, and it's like going VIP whenever you tour with these guys. It's fantastic. But it was a very, very special day. So because of that day, some things started to happen for us. And one of the things was that we talked quite a bit about a legacy and a shirt. And when a young Red Lion gets presented a shirt, there's a little bit of a ceremony, and often we will get someone that's worn the shirt before to deliver it to them. Now, what's special in 2018 was when you win a World Cup, you get this honor to put a little star above your logo, and it's tiny. It's just this little black star, but it represents all the players that have been there before, plus the 18 players that on that particular day made the star a better one. And so now when we present the shirt to new Red Lions or young Red Lions, we challenge them. And the challenge that they have is to take this shirt and see if they can improve it, if they can take it to a better place, and see if they can get another star. And so it's actually my last slide, so I probably need to slow down. I'm meant to have 10 minutes, so I'll go a bit slower. But this is a team that won in Tokyo, and with these players, there's 18 players that fulfilled their dream, and they're grown up always wanting to win a medal at the Olympics. But what is really special with these particular photos is the first one, they are now what is inspiring other players to come forth and try and achieve the same type of thing. And the last picture, that's actually my eldest boy, but it's a few years ago, and his name's Coda, and again, I'd like to thank my wife for that. It's an interesting name, but he's a cool little kid, loves hockey. And so what he would do is he would walk into the stadium, he'd come up to the front, and he would have this place, and he would sit there, and people would, because he's quite popular or quite well known in the hockey thing, they'd be calling out his name. He ignored them, and he would just watch intently the Red Lions, how they walked on the field, how they would warm up, all those type of things, and especially how they played. So recently, one of the things that happened was the Hockey Federation asked me to sign something in a book, and I'm not a wordsmith, and it took me a little while to think of something. But the thought that I had was that I wrote, I hope my children grow up to be Red Lions, even if they never play hockey. Because I think the one thing that sports has is it's one of the last frontiers or last domains where children and people can learn the disappointment and failure, but also the success and joy of being part of a team. I'd like to thank you for listening today. I've gone a little bit quicker. There is, I think, you're going to do it? Oh. Yeah.
So, hello everybody. You have the QR code for the part for the question in case you have some.
Okay.
So. Okay, the first question came. What's the first thing you told the Red Lion after they lost in Paris?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really difficult moment. So when the Red Lions lost in Paris, it's kind of like there, everyone goes through a mourning kind of process. And so what happens is often the team separates. If you remember the picture of coming together as a team, the mourning part happens almost the opposite. So what happens is players and coaching staff, they have to deal with that, the loss of or an unexpected loss or a disappointment in their own way first. And what you watch happen after a disappointment is you watch them starting to link together and come together until in the end you have an opportunity to put them all back together. Yeah, but you're never able to choose the exactly right words when you lose something because, yeah, it's the end of something and the beginning of something else. And so, yeah, it was really quite a difficult one, that one. Hard one to answer.
Okay, second question. The three people everyone wanted in their line, would you say that now this was based on their skill or on the social skill?
Yeah. So when we were talking about the three people at the start, it was collective. You know, like often there's a connection with players that are skillful and confident in an area. They are often the same ones that give a lot to the group. You know, and so we're always looking for athletes that make other athletes play better. You know, like there's a small portion of players that are gifted enough just to be able to play, but the big thing that we look for is who can make everyone play well. And one of the best examples I've had over the last sort of 6 or 7 years was our captain, Tom Abrills, was an exceptional people person. And so his gift to the team was he would make everyone feel good. And when everyone felt good, they would play well. And that was his gift.
Okay. Second, other question. How do you successfully include a new player in an established group, especially if that new person has a different personality?
That's a really good question, not an easy one. So, yeah, the onboarding is interesting in a sports team. So it's a little bit different than companies. Often in companies there's a whole lot that come together, and so they can feel comfortable or awkward together. In a hockey team, you often are onboarding one athlete, and so what you try and do is you try and make them feel as comfortable as possible in the environment, but secondly you try and put them surrounded by players that have that experience. And we have kind of 3 generations operating in the Belgian Red Lions. We have the newbies or the young guns, we have a group that have been in there for a while, and then we have the statesmen. And the statesmen try and pick up and give a bit of guidance to the new players that come in. So that's kind of the conveyor belt that we try and use.
Okay. How do you take a group of focused individuals and get them to build on such transversal matter without hindering your leadership position?
That's a really interesting question. Firstly, I think you have to, when you're in a leadership role and you give a lot away or try and give as much autonomy away as possible, you have to be comfortable in doing that, you know, and you have to be confident enough in yourself that you can let things go, you know. Probably my biggest learning was that at one point in my coaching career, I thought I had to control everything, and that was probably the most disappointing part of my career, and for performances and things like that. And it wasn't, or maybe it was because of that, I remember that the best way to operate is to empower others and make sure that you give them some ownership on what you're doing. The more collective you are as a leader, the more that you're going to get out of your teams that you're working with.
Okay. How do you bring the 5 key points to the new generation that is coming? The key points you presented at the beginning.
Yeah. So it's a repackaging. So I've just been appointed as head coach again. So I went from head coach up to Tokyo. Then I took a couple of years sabbatical. So I went back to New Zealand, had a life, and then came back here and got on staff, but in a kind of an assisting type role. They've asked me to take over the team again. And so what I see is a really nice new challenge. So it's taking a new group of people through the similar type of process, but I also have to make it different. You can't just roll out the same thing. You have to stick to the principles, but you have to kind of challenge yourself and keep it fresh. So we're going through that process at the moment, and it's really enjoyable. There's a lot of energy with the new group, and I think they're going to do special things.
Okay, maybe the last question.
Yeah.
How do you keep how do you keep motivated when they aren't making noticeable progress?
How do I keep motivated when they are? Sorry?
How do you keep people motivated when they're not making noticeable progress?
Yeah, look, there's a period that we often will go through. Like if you remember, there was an image of a mountain. The mountain is quite a good way to describe the journey of an athlete. So the climb of the mountain can be a grind. So it's each day turning up at training. It's dark, it's wet. You have a double session. You have a smoothie at the mid break. That's the highlight of your day. But by the time you get home, it's cold. You just want to lie on the couch, and you just want your partner to bring you food and feed you and love you, and that's about it. There are a lot of moments like that. And what we talk to our athletes about is that you don't have to love those moments, but you have to appreciate those moments for what they are. And they're the moments that change the color of the medal from a silver to a gold or a bronze to a gold, is that recognizing that is part of it. There are times when you're not going to see that progress, but in the end, if you've put the work in and made those commitments, you're going to get there. And so it's an important part of the process, is the climb.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.